Hi, and welcome to another episode of You Haven't Seen What? A married couple's quest to rectify the wrongs of their partner never seeing culturally relevant movies.
I'm Parry.
I'm Joelle.
And we are the married couple in question.
Yes, we are. We are still married.
I was going to say it, but last time we jinxed it by saying that at the same time, so I held back to see if you would say it.
Just assume that if you hear the podcast, we're still married.
If we suddenly go off the air...
You know that he's died. Yeah, today we're reviewing Princess Bride.
Yes, we've gotten to the point of a very large cultural favorite here that Joelle has not yet seen.
Because Blade Runner was not a large cultural favorite.
I would venture to say that Princess Bride actually has a larger following, if not more dedicated.
Because they're younger.
Yeah. I feel like so many people grew up on this film. Blade Runner is one you often discover later when you can really process some of the pieces of it. But I feel like Princess Bride is one that you see typically when you're much younger, whether you saw it as a kid in the 80s or 80s kids who are now parents are showing it to their kids.
Okay, so with that, you want to go ahead and give us a synopsis? 4 lines, max. 4 lines.
A peasant girl for some reason has a... What? You're looking at me funny.
I don't really think she's a peasant girl if she has a stable hand.
I thought they said she was a commoner or
she's
something.
She's a commoner, but she's not a peasant.
Okay. So there's a country girl who has a stable boy who she is secretly in love with. And eventually they get together, but he feels like he's too poor. He goes off to earn his fortune. He's supposedly killed by a pirate. And she ends up engaged to the prince, doesn't love him, but is going to marry him anyway because she's just that depressed. And dude comes back for her, and all kinds of cool stuff ensues.
Dude comes back for her.
And there's a giant and some swordplay, and it is bookended by a grandfather telling the story to his grandson. But we'll get to all that.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's not bad. That was a little long-winded, but not bad. And so what's our podcast named after? What quote from the movie?
It is a line where, of course, one of the most famous lines, there's many, but one of the most famous to come out of the film was Wallace Shawn's "Inconceivable." And
that was pretty good.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
That was pretty good.
I've watched a lot of Rex on Toy Story. But at one point he says that to Mandy Patinkin's character of
Inigo Montoya.
Yes, indeed. I'm glad you could fill that in. And he says that, and he says, "You keep saying that. I do not think it means what you think it means."
I do not think it means what you think it means.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, my Spanish accent was not good. Not as good as my Wallace Shawn.
No. But it's okay. It's forgivable. It's all forgivable. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of kind of a running theme about The Princess Bride. It's not necessarily what you think that it is or what you might think that it actually is. Because honestly, it's making fun of fairy tale stories. It's poking a little jab.
I think that's part of the magic of it for many people, is that it is being reverent and irreverent simultaneously. It obviously is inspired by classic fairy tales, but it's also jabbing a little fun at how ridiculous a lot of those fairy tales really are when you really get down to the heart of them. There's often a moral to them, but they're often very silly too, and they balanced that well in the book and the screenplay for this, written by the same person, of course.
Yeah, written by William Goldman.
Yes.
So I guess really the big part about it is kind of talking about when did you see this movie?
Well, and remember, I'm the one showing it to you this time because
right.
I felt like you needed to see this film. It was important. And I saw it dozens of times as a kid. My sister watched it a lot. It was one of those that she would finish, and then she would actually rewind the VHS. For all millennials, you used to have to rewind your movies before you could watch them again. It took a few minutes. Sometimes you even had a little separate machine you could stick the cassette in to do it faster. So my sister watched this so many times, and I would come in and out of the room and watch pieces of it, and I'd sit and watch the whole thing a number of times. But again, it was sort of shocking that you had never seen it, and my friend Judy Kalman would be horrified to know that you have never watched the whole thing. And so now we are rectifying that wrong.
Yeah, I've never seen it, which is very interesting. I come from a large family, and while I didn't have any brothers and sisters, I had cousins growing up, and we range in age, but it's all pretty close together. And I believe every single one of them have seen it. I'm not sure if the youngest has, but almost every single one of them have seen it and used to quote the movie, but I had not seen it.
And I don't want to gender type, but your cousins are all but one female.
Right.
And so I know there are a lot of men who love this film just as much, but it seems like, at least when we were younger, it seemed like girls liked it more.
I don't know. I don't know who. They all would quote it. I just remember hearing all of them quoting it. And 9 times out of 10, because the eldest was a boy, we were often following what he was doing.
Oh, so he was quoting.
So I believe he was quoting too. I don't remember, but I do remember them all pretty much quoting it and having a good laugh. And I'm like, okay, I definitely didn't get the joke. It didn't really bother me, but I definitely didn't get the joke.
Did you find yourself repeating the quotes even when you really didn't know their original context?
Yes. I mean, I know, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. And then they would have arguments over what the actual quote was. So
is that pre-Google?
This is pre-Google. So, I mean, they would go backwards and forwards about the actual quote. But of course, my cousin Melissa would always get it correct.
Of course she would.
Because she's the film buff in the family, for sure.
And she is that precise. Well, yeah, I think that, again, much like many films that are these cultural phenomenons, you are going to know a lot about it before you ever see it. At least you're going to know some of the quotes from it or some of the scenes, much like I knew the water scene from Flashdance without ever having seen it. You know, you knew these quotes.
Yeah, and I get why it was so wildly loved, actually, after seeing it. I understand why people loved it so much. At first, I had to scratch my head. I'm not kidding. It's like, okay, it's a great 80s cheesy movie. And as I kept sort of replaying different scenes in my mind, there's an underlying brilliance to it that I think becomes underappreciated by those, if you haven't seen it as an adult and you see it as an adult. It's really meant to be, kid driven in a way. It's definitely meant for a younger audience in a certain way, meaning that you're more susceptible to be drawn into it. And once you let your adult self get drawn into it, then you get a sort of different sense of it. And I think what was different for me is that I saw Cary Elwes in Robin Hood Men in Tights first. So I expected him to have this sort of goofy Mel Brooks overall moment. And that's not what it was. It was much more subtle, much more understated.
Right. And he was riffing on this role in many ways for that.
Exactly. So I think that was my level of expectation, the way that it was hyped up in that manner. That was sort of my expectation. And then watching it, I was sort of almost underwhelmed initially. And then I sort of really realized the brilliance of it. And I heard a quote from someone, and I'm sorry, I don't remember right now. They basically said sort of, it's like Scary Movie, what Scary Movie did for scary movies to fairy tales, but not so over the top, if that makes sense.
It's much more subtle.
Right.
And that's why it is a multiple viewing movie. I feel like no one can really get a full feel for it because, again, it didn't do well in its initial box office release because they didn't know how to market it. And that's because it is so many different things at once, and it appeals to so many different age groups. And that's what's really fascinating about it is that, when you see it as a kid, there are certain things you're going to enjoy, but as you watch it throughout your life, you're going to pick up different pieces about that. You're going to go from enjoying maybe some of the swashbuckling sword fighting and having the same reaction as the grandson where he's kind of grossed out by the kisses and not interested in that. But as you get older, you start to appreciate more the theme of true love, and not just the love between Wesley and Buttercup, our two main characters, if you've never seen it, are Wesley and Buttercup, but also the love between the grandfather and the grandson. And as that progresses throughout the film, and you really get a feel for who they are and how they care about each other and how that wraps up, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But like I said, I feel like it's something that it's harder to come into as an adult. It's kind of like, you make your best friends when you're kids.
It's sort of like watching The Never-Ending Story as an adult. That's really how I phrased it. The Never-Ending Story, when you are about 7 or 8 years old, is the best thing that you've ever seen in your entire life.
I still don't know what his mother's name is.
I'm not even going there with
rah,
you.
Rah, rah. I have no idea what he says.
Wrong movie. So it's kind of like seeing that as an adult and not necessarily understanding the magic behind it. But like I said, the more I really probed into it and the more I really understood it and was able to take it in and not necessarily take in all those expectations along with it, the more genius I actually saw in it. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Wah, wah, wah. Yeah, it's pretty much wah, wah, wah. I'm whistling right now. But I'm going to keep trying.
I wasn't doing a Nelson. I wasn't doing...
I'm going to keep trying. And so the good. All right, Parry, go for it.
Wow. The good, I have to say, is the casting.
Yes.
There isn't a weak link in here. I think that every member of the cast is truly at their best. Again, that was part of the magic of this, is sometimes you get a perfect storm of all of the right people in the right place at the right time who play off of each other in the perfect way and are truly friends, and that comes across in the final product.
They were friends for a reason. But we'll get to that.
Okay, excellent. I think even I have to admit, I thought that later on watching it, I thought Andre the Giant would be the weak link because, hey, we want this huge man in here because he fits the role. But I'd remembered as a kid having some trouble understanding his voice. But honestly, I understood everything perfectly. And in fact, it worked that it was a little bit slurred because that suited the character. And also, I found out that they, I know it's a production note, but that they had recorded all of his lines on a Walkman, and he would walk around listening to them so that he memorized them that way instead of through reading a script.
That is a production note.
Yeah, I couldn't help it.
Yep. So my good is actually pretty much the same. It's this ensemble cast.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of an ensemble cast. When you get it right, it really feels right. When you get it wrong, then you have all sorts of problems. But this ensemble cast really feels right. Speaking of right, Robin Wright is just amazing. I find her to be amazing now. I find her to be amazing then. Playing sort of this straight man princess. She really was. Like, she was the straight woman in this entire tale. She had to sort of be, the quintessential helpless princess in a way, but also was so convinced that her true love was going to come and find her. So that was sort of amazing to see. And then Mandy Patinkin. Yes, Jesus.
Not the battleship Potemkin. Even though he is a force in this movie.
Mandy Patinkin.
Yes.
Okay. Mandy Patinkin, I love you. I do. I love you in everything that you ever do. And this is definitely no exception. This is actually weird to see you younger because I know him basically as Gideon on Criminal Minds.
Don't forget Saul on Homeland either.
Yes, no. I know him as Saul, but when my first...
What is his name?
Stop. My first intro to him really was as Gideon on Criminal Minds. And it's like this wise sage moment. And you're like, wow, I obviously have daddy issues because I find you so incredibly attractive. But I do. I really do. I'm just like wrapped up in the mind, brain. And the more that you know about him and what he's acted in and what he's done and just in life in general too, it's kind of amazing.
Well, he can't help but become the role. In every role that he does, he is so deeply immersed in becoming that person. Even in the interviews and the special features, if you've never watched the special features on the DVD, watch them just for Patinkin's parts. Because when he tells the tales of how people have asked him to repeat the Inigo Montoya lines, or what it was like to be in the film or work with Andre the Giant, he gets emotional and he goes back into the role and into that time, and there's a weight and a gravity to his just telling these stories.
All do. That's just the thing, is that this cast really were like family.
Yeah.
And they all, even when you see them interact on like little videos regarding anniversaries, or they're all just talking together, or right before, I think the big entertainment spread came out back in 2011, I think.
The reunion.
They all are just so enamored with each other. They had the best time filming this. And that's really what is conveyed. So should we talk about the bad?
And I just want to add how supportive they were of each other as well. And there's a story that I need to tell about Andre the Giant and Wallace Shawn whenever we'll wait for production notes.
Okay. The bad.
The scene where Andre the Giant, Fezzik, is playing the Dread Pirate Roberts, and they have him on the wheelbarrow, and it is so obviously not a human. It is just a scarecrow that they're going to set on fire. And if they had played it as such, and maybe his voice was behind it or from somewhere over to the side, if he was hiding and throwing his voice over to it, that would make more sense. But they play it as though he's actually in the Holocaust cloak that they're about to set on fire. And you see his face in the close-ups, but from the distance, it is very obviously just a mannequin. And I thought that was a little weak and could have been shot a little better.
Okay, that's fair. That's one of my same bads. I think another one of my bads is, why could we not get any more of Billy Crystal and Carol Kane? Like, why was that scene so short? I don't understand. I needed more.
And they shot a ton. It was sort of like, Robin Williams is the genie. Like, he just kept going, and there's a ton of it, but they had to cut it down.
No. Oh, it was so good. I wanted more. I just thought their comedic performance, their timing, their believability as a couple, and I know that's part of production notes, but was amazing, and I just really wanted more. So that's my bad. So shame on you, Rob Reiner. Why don't we have more? Why don't you release an uncut version of all of their shenanigans so that we can enjoy for the next major anniversary?
At least just a reel of outtakes of Billy Crystal just doing his whole shtick.
Oh, and Carol Kane, please do not dismiss her at all.
Yeah, no, she was fantastic as well.
All right, so The Ugly? Dun, dun, dun.
So I think I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for My Ugly.
Oh gosh,
and
no.
I can't help it. It has bothered me since I was a child. It's the only part that made me crazy.
Oh, I know. That dang song.
Storybook Story.
Oh boy.
It's not even the whole song. Even though the way he's singing it kind of sounds like You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling in Top Gun, It's
okay, but
my
remember,
love is like a...
Yeah. Remember, they're sort of making fun of it.
I know.
Just you've got to take the humor in it.
And the fact that he says storybook story, as I got older, I started to realize, okay, I think he is joking around a bit. But I don't know. That song has always just... It makes me twitch, and I try, but I don't think I'll ever be able to. Luckily, it's at the end, so I can just, I love the theme version of it when they do it without the words. It's great. I can just turn it off before they play it, and I can still enjoy.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think my ugly are the eels. I hate them. They're gross. Why do we need them to look so awfully horrific? I'm not quite sure why the eels need to literally look like Jaws. I don't quite get it. However,
I thought that scene was going to be a grandpa ex machina, in that they weren't going to show, because he stops when he's telling the story. He stops reading and he goes, "She gets away because you look worried. I want to make sure she gets away." I thought they were just going to come back to her in the boat, and so therefore ignoring how she got out. But I'm at least glad they explained that.
I guess eels were so unnecessary.
In the book, Vizzini fills a cup with blood and throws it into the water to attract sharks so that she won't jump overboard and swim. It's much darker.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Sharks or eels? The eels look like sharks, so I don't know which one is darker in that aspect.
The teeth are pretty nasty. The piranha teeth.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I have a thing about piranhas because of the movie Piranha. That's a whole nother podcast.
1 or 2?
I don't know which one. It was when I was young. I was scarred a lot when I was young, but that's besides the point.
You know, I have never seen the piranha movies.
Listen, I don't know that we can watch the piranha movies, and we're off track. And going back on track, hey, production notes with Parry.
Oh gosh.
Oh, okay. You have so many. Can I give just the uptake first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's let production notes with Joelle.
Okay. So this was released September 25th, 1987. The running time was about 98 minutes. Their budget was $16 million and did about 31 at the box office. So they made money. So that was great. In terms of critical reception, it was really well received. 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, 3.5 stars out of 4 for Roger Ebert. IMDb gives it an 8.1 out of 10 still. So everybody still loves this movie. Everyone, I mean, for the most part, really thinks that it's a smash. Now, I know it didn't make as much money as it was supposed to when it first came out or when it initially came out, but it didn't exactly tank either.
No.
And then once it went to VHS cassette, I know the cult following really just started from there.
It's where the cult following started for a lot of movies, where you could just rewind it and watch it over and over all afternoon and really develop a deep affection for a film like this.
Oh, wait, I have one more weird bad.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I came back to it.
No, I do it all the time, so please.
I'm sorry. Yo, Robin, right, rolling down the hill after. Why does Buttercup have to roll after Wesley? I know that it's that critical moment. She realizes, and then all of a sudden she throws herself off this cliff. That is not intelligent. Maybe you should see where he lands first and then figure out how to get down. Why couldn't you run down? Why do you have to throw yourself down on the ground because you've, made it awful? I don't understand.
Again, I think it's part of the intentional silliness that the princess always seems to be running after the prince or whatever in traditional fairy tales, and so the way she sort of throws herself down and they exaggerate the oof, ow as they're rolling down the hill makes it extra silly, but it's true. It still is following that old idea.
She could have run down. I would have been fine.
She could
have run down. I mean, that was commitment, but you could have run down. Speaking of commitment, back to production notes.
There is so much to say about this film, but I think people who enjoy it they know a lot of these stories already. So I'm going to tell a few of the ones that I thought were the most interesting. And first of all, Andre the Giant. Of course, he's a fascinating character, and he has a posse. Growing up in the 80s, if you watched any wrestling, I watched a little, and he was fascinating because he was truly a giant. But the truth is, he was very weak during the making of this film. He was going through a lot of back issues. And
he just had back surgery right before filming.
Right. So
because he got body slammed by Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania.
Indeed.
3.
I was going to say which one, but
3.
You're so good.
I did research.
They had to transport him around in an ATV. The scene where Buttercup jumps into his arms, she was actually lowered via cables into his arms, and when he's riding the horse, there's actually a deleted scene at the end of the movie where Fred Savage, as the grandson, was going to look out his window and see them outside of his window riding up to the house, and they shot it against a green screen, and they were all going to be waving up to him, and it's how they were going to close it out. But Andre the Giant couldn't ride the horse, and so they had him on wires. So, and there's outtakes of that scene, but they never finished it, so it's not a completed effect scene. But,
so do you know the backstory behind who was supposed to play? do you know the whole deal? As you know, who's supposed to play Fezzik? Rob Reiner initially wanted Andre the Giant, but Andre the Giant was supposed to do this big event in Japan, which he was getting paid more money than what he got paid to do Fezzik. For obviously, one night versus, a whole production. But then the Japan thing fell through. But in the meantime, do you know who they auditioned?
I do, and it
Who?
would have been a very, very different movie had the original choice been...
There's two choices.
I know the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
Yes.
which would have been crazy.
Yes,
interesting.
but you also know who else?
No.
It's who you turn into when you get angry.
Lou Ferrigno?
Yes!
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 Oh, that would have been cool, actually.
Yeah.
I still think Andre the Giant is, again, we know him too well in the role to really picture anyone else, but I think Lou Ferrigno could have pulled it off.
I don't know, but either way, Andre the Giant was there, and he was just an integral part of the cast, and it was awesome to see, but it was just good trivia.
And I think most people know the story about him putting his hand over Robin Wright's head to keep her warm. But one I didn't know is one that Mandy Patinkin tells in the special features. No, is one where apparently when they were doing the Cliffs of Insanity scene, Wallace Shawn was very afraid of heights and was very nervous about doing that scene. And as they were started to lift him up, he started to freak out a little bit because they had him all on wires. And Andre says, you know, it's okay. It's going to be all right. And to hear Patinkin tell it, he gets deep into it. He's like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. And apparently after that, he was not afraid, that it really did calm him down. Maybe it's also because they had been in a film together before, My Dinner with Andre the Giant.
Oh, right.
I'm kidding.
You're a jerk.
It is My Dinner with Andre, but Andre the Giant is not in it.
I'm not talking to you anymore.
Sorry, that was a shout out to my old friend Brian Vaughn, who used to use that title a lot.
Okay, great. Are those your production notes? Because if not, I have a couple of my own.
Please go ahead. I may chime in again.
Okay, so Rob Reiner, there's a little backstory with this entire screenplay and this whole filming process. It was really supposed to be made 12 years prior, but it was not working, basically. So they shelved it, and then Goldman actually bought the rights back. And then Rob Reiner approached Goldman with actually help from All in the Family's producer, director. Yes. But Rob Reiner really loved the book ever since his father had given it to him. And he really wanted to do this. So as he was filming Stand By Me, everyone was sort of asking him, hey, what's your next love? What's your next thing? And he actually said, I want to go ahead and do The Princess Bride. And what's really interesting is that I didn't really realize this, but Rob Reiner is Michael, or Meathead from All in the Family.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize that. You really realize that?
I did know that, but that's because I was a big Reiner fan way back and a fan of his father as well, Carl Reiner.
Right. So, I mean, Rob Reiner gave us such great things as This is Spinal Tap, which I've never seen.
Oh, we're going to get there.
I know we're going to get there. Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, one of my all-time freaking movies of all time. A Few Good Men, Misery, Ghost of Mississippi, LBJ, so much more. And then as an actor, he's portrayed so many different things. You can actually see him now in New Girl. So that's some interesting.
That producer, by the way, is Norman Lear.
Yes, Norman Lear. Thank you.
And he produced a number of really seminal TV shows that changed the way television is made, like All in the Family,
right?
You know, Good Times and Sanford and Son, and so a lot of films that defined American television and really changed the game.
Yeah. So Lear is the one who really helped convince Goldman to go ahead and let Reiner do this. So it really was a confluence of so many different pieces coming together and making this film.
So I have one more little Andre the Giant trivia. His family didn't own a car when he was a kid, and so he would get a ride to school. The neighbor would drive him to school. And when he was telling the cast about this, he said, oh, and you may have heard of my neighbor, Samuel Beckett, the famous playwright, was his neighbor who used to drive him to school. So it was like waiting for Andre.
Nice. Waiting for Andre. Another little crazy tidbit. Do you know who was cast a week prior to filming?
Only a week?
A week prior.
Who?
Robin Wright.
Did they have some other choice before?
They interviewed so many women for this role, and they could not figure anyone out until she came in. And Reiner said, that's Buttercup.
And she's like 20 in it. Elwes is 23.
Yes.
Yeah, and they are, I have to say, they are gorgeous to look at in this. They are both just perfect for that role. In fact, it's the part of it, I think, is intentional, that they're almost too perfect, that they just look so perfectly gorgeous that it is very fairy tale.
Right. And that's a lot of it. And she had done really just like Santa Barbara. She was on that soap where she met her first late husband on that soap opera. And then she went to go ahead and doing this, and then so much more as her life progressed. And then, of course, she was married to Sean Penn. Yuck. Sorry. Not yuck on his acting skills, just their marriage was yucky.
Well, I had a friend who used to say professional actor or professional musician or whatever, but they'd say amateur human being.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's kind of a low blow. But either way, that's why we didn't see her so often, is that, you know, his career was taking off in a time where her career, she was pregnant and staying at home with the kids. So they'd switch on and off to try to be good parents to their kids. And most of the parts that they were getting were sort of his parts and just more money for his parts. So that's why we didn't see her for so long. And then now, of course, she reappears as Claire in House of Cards, and you basically just want to love her.
Don't forget Wonder Woman.
Oh, I can't forget Wonder Woman. Are you joking me? She's such a badass.
Well, and that's
such a badass.
And that's what's so impressive, is that she didn't get typecast into just playing Buttercup knockoffs. She actually has really...
Jenny? A little bit.
Yeah, Jenny is somewhere in between the two. It's kind of like if Buttercup went wrong. But Jenny wasn't that tough. Whereas her roles currently are really very steely, tough, but still very likable in many ways. Like, you want to be angry with Claire Underwood, but you also want her to win somehow.
Yeah. No, and you see some Claire Underwood glances in The Princess Bride. It's amazing. Her glances really can cut a knife right through you.
Speaking of a knife cutting right through you.
Go ahead.
Cary Elwes, you know, his scenes throughout the film, they're very familiar, and again, they're playing on a certain type, which is the Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Errol Flynn style of pirates, the swashbuckling pirates, you know, Captain Blood. And those, you know, Captain Blood was a pirate, and so he's very much playing that part. Even though they drew inspiration for his costume from Zorro. But they didn't want him to wear the hat because they didn't think that would fit. But they did base it on Zorro.
Yes, let's talk about him and Mandy doing all of the sword fighting for months before production.
The chatty duel, as it's known.
Oh my gosh, that duel is everything. They're right-handed, then switching to left hand. They had to learn each other's parts besides their own parts. They had to learn all this choreography.
And they were learning from, you know, Olympians and people who had worked on Star Wars and, you know, many other films, who were masters at swordplay.
Right. It went so smoothly. In fact, on the first take, Rob Reiner was like, that's it. You got to go back and do more.
Yeah, it was unimpressive that it was so short. So they actually wanted to have it be the longest filmed sword fight to that point. And
No. They didn't want it to be the longest. They wanted it to be the most in depth, because what's the longest one? The longest one is Squash. I gotta look this up. So what they were going for was the 1952 Scaramouche that featured the longest and most intricate sword battle. And what they wanted was to sort of imitate that, to make it epic in a way, in its own way. Not necessarily to imitate it exactly, but to make it epic in its own way. And I think they definitely achieved that. All of the sword fighting is pretty much done with the exception of the flips. Those are stunt doubles. But other than that, Patinkin and Elwes do all of the sword fighting.
And their interplay during that sword fight, it's not just the, you know, I will destroy you or I'm better than you. Just the banter that they have is so fantastic, where they're talking technique, but they're also just talking. And it shows how effortlessly good they are at what they do, that they can not even really pay attention to the fight and have this conversation. And it also has one of the great lines in the movie to me, which is, and this one got a genuine belly laugh from you, was the part where he says, where Patinkin is talking to Elwes and trying to get information out of him, and he says, I must know. And Elwes says, get used to disappointments.
Yeah, because I say that all the time. Disappointments. But do you have any more production notes overall? Did I ever talk about Reiner's house?
No.
Okay. One thing that happened was Rob Reiner rented a house, and a lot of the cast would come over for regular dinners and hangouts.
This was all shot in England too, right?
It was Great Britain and Ireland.
Yeah, except for the scenes with Peter Falk as grandpa and Fred Savage the grandson. That was on a soundstage.
Right. After they had done all the filming overseas.
Fred Savage never met Gary Elwes.
Oh, yeah. It was completely separate. So they sort of saw a couple of things that studio sets that were done afterwards, but for the most part, they really weren't a part of any of all of that. So the other cast, though, they would go ahead and they would hang out. And that's a lot of where all this bonding came from and all of these great stories and this love that they still have for each other so many years later is because they really hung out quite a bit offset.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked about that in a few of the other films, like in April Fool's Day, the director had them all hang out together and spend time, and then actually went back and shot a few extra scenes based on the interactions he saw when they were just hanging out. And so that can really add to a film that to have your actors really get to know each other.
Yeah, it completely does. It adds a whole nother level to just the cohesiveness. And then even Billy Crystal and Carol Kane, they were improvising with each other and creating backstories before they ever went on to production. Mm-hmm. Like months before they went on to production, they were hanging out and talking about, well, what's the deal with Miracle Max and Valerie? They've been married for so long, they have to have this sort of banter.
A backstory is always important.
So they did. They went ahead and they figured out their backstory, and it was great.
It makes sense too, though, to know that they shot the fire swamp scenes first in the film, because I always felt like for a couple that has just been reunited, I know they're in a dangerous situation, but they just don't seem as closely connected as they do in other parts of the film. And maybe it's just because they didn't know each other as well yet. But there was always something about, especially when he's explaining how the Dread Pirate Roberts works and how it's always different people. And she sort of nods and then shakes her head like, no, I don't really understand. And I don't know, there was something that just always felt a little off about that to me. And I think maybe it's just they just didn't know each other well enough yet, because there's so much more intensity and chemistry later on.
I mean, all they were worried about those big, gigantic rodents of unusual size jumping out.
Which that does get a good jump out of anyone who is seeing it for the first time.
Got one out of me, that's for sure.
Do you know that was actually people in costume?
It had to be. They're huge. They're huge. I don't know. It was like some Dark Crystal moment. It was not okay.
I was about to say,
okay.
do you think the fire swamp was just taken from the Dark Crystal?
Pretty much. Pretty freaking much. Same shit.
Oh, we're going to get to the Dark Crystal on another day.
Oh, yeah. He tortured me with that one. Anyway, I think, do you have any more production notes, or are we rounding up?
Tell me about Rob Reiner's hat. The hat that's hanging in the bedroom. You had me looking for the hat. What's the story of the hat?
It wasn't Rob Reiner's hat. It was actually Mark Knopfler. He wanted to go ahead and have this USS, what is it?
The hat is actually one that Rob Reiner wore in Spinal Tap, because he's a character in the film as a documentary filmmaker. He's wearing the hat throughout. So how did it wind up in the background here? I'm
pretty sure Mark Knopfler, which is interesting that we should just segue into soundtrack smashes. But Mark Knopfler, who is the one who composed the soundtrack, and he's from Dire Straits, he said, hey, I'll do the movie if you can go ahead and put that hat in the movie. It was weird.
Which, people always love to put little references to things in the background. So, and being a musician, he probably really loved Spinal Tap. So he wanted to see it in there somewhere.
Yeah,
but I think it's for the USS Coral Sea, I think is the hat. It's fascinating to me that Knopfler, who, if you don't know, is from Dire Straits, did the score to this film. And, of course, the song that I don't like so much. But, Mr. Money for Nothing. Who would have thought that he had that much beauty in his soundtrack, in his music? I was really impressed.
Yeah, it actually is. I find that, and this I guess is soundtrack smashes, I find that there's a wistfulness about it in a very I mean, in a very fairy tale way. There's a wistfulness, and then there's, parts where there's like hope and light, and then there's definitely more, dark scenes, and those pieces obviously reflect that. But for the most part, it really just it just became this other character sort of in the background. Every single score should feel like another character that is not interfering. I feel like that is a sign of a successful score. It's additive. It's not subtractive. It's not overwhelming. It's there, and you recognize that it's there, and it plays a great part, but it's not just overwhelming the film. And so Knopfler really does a great job in that.
I like that there are moments that stand out intentionally because they're overdone. And while it has these beautiful, melancholy, subtle moments, it seems like some of the action sequences have this sort of over-the-top sound. And I believe that not only were they trying to sound like those pirate films I was mentioning earlier, the action-adventure films of the past, but I think it was, again, pointing out that this is farcical in many ways, and that it was putting punctuation on that.
So what's your favorite? You have a favorite track from the score?
I really love those moments that are intentionally over the top because you don't necessarily catch them the first time. And when they're running through the castle at the end, there's several of them, and they're peppered throughout the film. But again, to me, they help point out that this is meant to be a bit silly, and that if you're taking it more seriously than that, you're doing it wrong.
Oh, fair enough. I think my favorite is I Will Never Love Again. So it's pretty much after Buttercup finds out that Wesley is supposedly dead, and
that one's very sweet.
Yeah, so it's very sweet. It has this wistfulness, and it's a hint of dark, but in a very, very beautiful way, not melancholy. It's just very beautiful, very picturesque. It's in the background and it's playing, and there's still like a tinge of hope in it. So I dig it.
So,
oh, and by the way, your most loved song. Note my sarcasm there. Storybook Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nominated for Best Song Academy Awards that year.
I find that hard to believe.
It was.
Storybook Story.
I'm just letting you know why. The whole thing is just a play on it. And why would the song not be a play on it?
Again, maybe because they were recognizing the genius of the silliness. I can go for that.
Okay. I mean, the music is great behind the lyrics.
Yes. I will definitely give that. The music behind it is great. That's why I love it as a score more so than as the lyrics. So.
All right. Well, let's get into cultural impact, because oh boy, does this film have tons of fans, and just so many different things that it ended up impacting as a whole. I mean, my generation, definitely, for sure, and continued generations.
Yes, I have friends who can quote it beginning to end, and they're far from alone. There are many out there who can, and who love it as their number one top favorite film.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I mean, it's impacted the wedding industry. People do whole weddings based around The Princess Bride.
Yes, in full costume even.
I mean, the whole As You Wish thing is out of control.
Tattoos and bumper stickers and T-shirts. And I does anyone put a bumper sticker on anymore? Am I dating myself again?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Bumper stickers are too big now.
And bumpers are just plastic. I even said it a few times to you, knowing you didn't know the reference.
Oh, As You Wish?
Yes.
I know you did.
But
which I don't know if I should say this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I like that saying.
Yeah.
In a way.
Why not?
Because it makes Wesley seem subservient to Buttercup, which I know at the time he was. And that was his way of saying I love you. And I get it. But I guess because I didn't see it in that, through those eyes, those childlike eyes of saying, as a way of saying I love you, it just sounds subservient to me.
Well, also in those early scenes when he's saying that, he stares at her with the eyes of a maniac. His stare is so maniacal that I started having movie crossover where I thought he was in, what's the one? Is it Kiss the Girls or Along Came a Spider?
Oh,
where
Kiss the Girls.
Kiss the Girls, where he's the killer, and that then Mandy Patinkin was going to have to come in with the BSU to investigate.
Stop it.
His eyes were freaking me out a little bit at the beginning.
Well,
but you notice when he becomes the Dread Pirate Roberts, he almost has that sleepy confidence. He's not so wild-eyed. He's more calm.
Well, because he's supposed to have grown up.
Yes.
And gone out in the world. Confident. So ergo, there's no need to have this persona, right? Because now he has a new one. Now he has a different confidence level and everything else.
Yes, he's Batman.
He's not Batman.
He's dressed like Batman.
He's not dressed like Batman. He just said he was dressed like Zorro. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, there's a fan site for everybody out there.
Of course.
It's called princessbrideforever.com. So shout out to you guys for keeping that fan site pretty much up to date. And of course, there is a book, an audiobook by Carrie Elwes. Oh my gosh,
Is it Elwes or Elwes?
Elwes. It's Elwes?
I may be totally wrong on that. I've always thought it was Elwes.
I hope it's Elwes. That's how we're saying it. But it's called As You Wish, The Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride. And if you do the audiobook, it's actually read by Carrie and featuring Billy Crystal, Christopher Guest, Carol Kane, Norman Lear, Rob Reiner, Chris Sarandon, Robin Wright, Wallace Shawn, and so on. And it's available, and those links will be up on our website as well. Anything else under cultural impact?
So I'm just curious if you think that maybe George R.R. Martin got a bunch of his ideas for Game of Thrones from watching Princess Bride. There seems to be some crossover of characters.
Oh, man. I don't know about all that.
I mean, we've got the Mountain, and I guess if Buttercup got really bitter, she could be Cersei.
No. There's way more depth behind Games of Thrones than that. Come on.
I'm just saying.
Did anyone roll down a hill?
I don't know. There's been like 8 seasons. I'm not. Someone had to roll down a hill at some point.
I don't think so. Not like that.
The Hound rolls down a hill.
Them. Oh, Mabes. No, I mean, then you would be comparing the Hound with Wesley. Is that really what's happening? Is he really an as you wish kind of guy?
No. He's maybe more like, I don't know. Isn't he like Jon Snow? He wears all black. He gets killed. He comes back to life.
Who gets killed? Oh, Wesley gets killed and comes back to life.
Jon Snow gets killed, gets brought back to life by...
by miracle people bringing him back to life.
Yeah. So, I see what I'm saying?
I don't know.
If anyone knows George R.R., please let us know if he's a big Princess Bride fan.
I'm sure he's a big Princess Bride fan. It would line up.
I think so. There were a couple of really amazing stories of how deeply this has affected some people. And one of them was an Iraq veteran who every time that they would go into battle, he would say, "Have fun storming the castle." Or my favorite was a group of skiers or hikers that were trapped in an avalanche in the snow. And one of them acted out the entire film from memory repeatedly to keep everyone alive, basically, to keep their mind off the cold and the hunger and keep them alive, and they were all rescued. So that's really, truly amazing.
Yeah, there's just some, and I'm sure everybody has their own Princess Bride movie story. So if you guys want to share, that would be amazing. So I guess I want to ask you why you decided to show me this movie. Why is it so relevant for you, Parry, to show me this movie?
Because Billy Crystal reminded me of Mel Brooks as yogurt in Spaceballs.
Oh, well, that makes sense. He was going for a Mel Brooks type feel. That makes sense.
I think because it's important to know why certain films have the impact that they do on people. And much like you said, this is a hard one to watch for the first time as an adult and really get the appeal until you start thinking about it or watching it again. This movie really hits in the perfect sweet spot for many of us who saw it as preteens, in that we were growing out of the kid stuff. We didn't want to see fairy tales or admit that we still liked those things, but we weren't ready for all the kissy business either. And much like Fred Savage's grandson character in the film, he's dismissive of those things until later when he's really gotten into the story. He wants more the action, the adventure, and that's what we were really putting on airs at that age. We're growing up. We want more adult things, but we can still sort of privately like the fairy tale part and the growing into the love part. But as you get older, you really start to see the love aspects of the film and find those very endearing and sweet, but still be connected to how you perceived it as a child. And I think this is something that, you and I have discussed already, and we talked about with Electric Dreams, is that you get very close to the movies you see as a child. And you have to understand that maybe your spouse or significant other is never going to see it quite the same way you do because you came at it from a different time in your life. It's why having friends you meet as a kid is a different thing because they knew you when you were someone different, when you weren't your adult self yet. And I also think it's why a lot of the franchises that are getting rebooted and movies that are getting remade are so frustrating and disappointing to these old fans because they don't want to see it change. They don't want to see it move on. It's part of why Last Jedi was so hard for so many people, is it really shifted the paradigm on Star Wars to some people's delight and many people's extreme displeasure. Because, again, these things are tied to the core of who we are, culturally and individually. And it is really hard to sometimes see that change. But this film grows with its audience, and that's a rare thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of our generation is now showing it to their kids.
Yes.
Of the same age that they were when they first saw it. And it's very still... It's still timely enough. You still, they're because it's set in that era, you don't have a flip cell phone somewhere.
It doesn't feel dated.
It's dated because it's a fairy tale, but it doesn't have to be dated in that sort of, I guess, clueless way where they have this big old cell phone in there. Right.
Well, they do have Fred Savage playing that old Nintendo game. That's pretty dated.
Yeah, but it's very small in comparison. It's very small.
That and the
now
refrigerator
with 8-bit and Minecraft coming back, that doesn't really phase them out anymore.
I guess the refrigerator Parry poster on the wall too is retro.
They're not noticing the refrigerator Parry poster on the wall. Only you're noticing the refrigerator Parry poster on the wall.
Because it was one of my nicknames as a kid, but that's because I was a little heavy.
Were you Hoss?
It wasn't because it's not because I was a football player.
That's not nice.
Do you have anything more, though, that you would like to say about... Because I was intrigued by what you were saying about how you've been turning it over in your head for the last few days, and I'm curious to hear where you started with it and where you are now with it.
Sure. Oh, gosh. Let's try not to alienate everyone, shall we? So when I first saw it, well, what's interesting about this is that I fell asleep twice while watching it. Now, to be fair, I've had very long days and I am balancing and juggling a lot of different things. So it really was at the end of the day, which is not always the best time of the day for me. But after I successfully watched the movie, at first I was sort of like, okay, that's it. This is what everyone's been talking about. That was my first initial reaction. And the more I read and the more I saw and the more everyone just kept talking about the relevancy and why it's so relevant. Not that I was influenced or swayed a different way, more so than I saw the film in a different way. And that's challenging. I had to step back and recognize that I was trying to see it from adult eyes. Mm-hmm. And that's not the lens in which they're trying to create it from. I mean, it's something that obviously can be enjoyed by adults as they watch it with their children or just to be enjoyed by adults in general. But my older eyes was not the intention. Not really. It was really supposed to be this fun-loving sort of piece that I had taken in all the hype and taken it way too seriously and thought I was going to see something, my expectations really superseded what the film was intended to be.
The hype machine does make it difficult.
Yeah, so I wasn't going into it thinking like, hey, cheesy 80s movie, like I have for so many other pieces. I was going into it, oh, this is The Princess Bride. This is revered. This is special. This is a special place in everyone's hearts, and it's amazing. And if you don't like it, you're the devil. It's sort of that sort of hype around it. So it's a little
almost
intimidating.
It's threatening, yeah.
It is. It's sort of like, what do you mean you don't like? What do you mean you haven't seen? What do you mean? And so when I saw it, it was sort of like, well, what do you mean this is the best thing that you've ever seen in your entire life, your number one film forever?
I think at the end you said, that's it, it's over.
I did say that's it, it's over. But and I can look back at this, in retrospect, there is a lot of genius leveled in it. And to see it as an adult is definitely a different experience than to see it as a child or a preteen or somebody who's younger, who is not so jaded, and without all of the hype. I think that's the biggest thing, is that all of the hype created it, in my mind, to be something that it really was never intending to be. It was never intending to be this serious film or a serious commentary. Now, it does have commentary, but I don't think that was the intention. The intention wasn't to be this major commentary regarding revenge, regarding, so many other things. I think really what it was intending on being was to be fun and to poke fun of fairy tales and to poke fun of itself. And that's what you got. And if that's what you wanted and that's what your expectation was, then you were good. If it was something more deep and meaningful, then it would have been, different.
And like I said, it's something that you can grow from childhood up through an adult to appreciate new things. But as an adult, there are certain things you can get right away. Like, I never realized watching it as a kid that I think Prince Humperdinck and Count Rugen are involved with one another. I definitely think
this is how you want to end this show.
Well, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
No.
I'm saying that especially in the time period, even though we don't know what real period it is, we have some idea, but they couldn't have ever admitted to having any affection for each other. But there's something about the way he says, I've got a wedding to plan and my wife to murder. I'm swamped. And Rugen says, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And these are two terrible men doing terrible things, and yet they're showing a genuine, if it's not love, it's a deep friendship and connection. And I actually thought that was kind of a neat thing, that despite how awful they actually are still great to each other somehow. I don't know. There was something different about that I hadn't noticed as a kid.
See, this is where we could really talk about this for forever, but we're not going to, because I have a whole lot more to say on that subject, or on this concept of bourgeoisie versus proletariat. I have plenty to say about all of those things, but we're going to go ahead and leave you at this point. Shameless self-promo. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. We don't know if you like it unless you tell us. So let us know. If you don't have anything nice to say, just remember Patrick Swayze's word in Roadhouse. Be nice. Check out our website at youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com, our social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at youhaven'tseenwhatmovie, and let us know what movies you think we should be interested in reviewing, or share your own stories of how these movies have impacted you, your life, and everything else in between.
We've gotten a few suggestions already for films that we should review. Thank you, Tony Dodd out there, who's got one on our list now. So, please submit your suggestions.
And let us know what you think about the podcast and what we are covering, not covering, missing. We would love to tell you we can cover everything, but in an hour it just seems inconceivable. Yes! And on that note, remember...
Be kind.
Rewind. Thanks and bye.
Yes. Bye.